Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Yoram Ettinger, who has served in a number of critical positions during his many years of service to Israel. Yoram, it is so great to see you today.
Thank you very much.
And you happen to be in the US right now. You still travel to the US quite frequently to advocate for Israel's national security. And therefore, I think you are very well positioned to share with us your thoughts on this war with Iran, and in particular, how the US and Israel partnered to really have a decisive action in Iran. So, what can you share with us?
Well, I will share with you that which I shared the last week and a half on Capitol Hill, House and Senate side. And the first point is the role of Israel. And Israel, in its offensive against Iran, acted in its capacity as the most unique, the most productive uh, force and dollar multiplier for the United States. When we carried out the operation on June 13, we did it with some 200 US combat aircraft. That was the most complex air operation actually since Second World War. It was carried out with American products, employed, or I would even say upgraded by the Israeli Air Force. And we acted as a showroom, as a AAA store for the US combat aircraft, F-35, F-16, F-15. The world was watching it. Countries contemplate where should they buy their next series of combat aircraft. They have an option, French or British or Chinese or Russian or American combat aircraft. The US has at its disposal the number one AAA store, which is not available to the Chinese and Russian and British and French. They can claim that their aircraft is very, very good, the best in the world, but they cannot demonstrate it. The US has the ability to demonstrate every single day why its product is the best in the world, and that obviously generates more exports, which we're talking about billions of dollars. But in the process, we operate the American aircraft in a very high intensity, way, way above the intensity employed by Americans for obvious reasons. The US does not face the challenges that we faced. And the minute we get the hardware from the US, for which we are immensely, immensely grateful, we start operating those combat aircraft, combat helicopters, and hundreds of American military systems as a battle-tested laboratory for the US. We save between 10 and 20 years of research and development. Anyone who knows anything about research and development cost of combat aircraft, that amounts to mega billion dollars saved by the Israeli Air Force. We develop battle tactics because of the intensity of our operations. And those battle tactics also are shared with the US Air Force, just like our ground forces share the battle tactics with the American ground forces, be it special operations or engineering corps or any branch of the US military powers. And that has enhanced the performance by the US when the American pilots experience their first do or die type of operation, they are going to do it with the added experience of the Israeli Air Force. It spares American lives, it enhances the military performance by the US. And when it comes again to the aerospace industry, defense industry, it is a unique bonanza, mega billion-dollar bonanza to the American taxpayers. Some 3.5 million Americans are employed by the US defense and aerospace industry. There are many, many more who are subcontractors connected to the defense and aerospace industries. All of them are positively impacted by the Israeli use of American military systems, as we have seen in the current war or the recent war between Israel and Iran, one can say between the US and Iran as well. Moreover, the Israeli operation, which was launched on June 13 and has gone or did go until a day ago, literally facilitated the entry by the US into this conflict. We resemble the field mining clearance corps, which cleared the minefield ahead of the ground forces' entry into the war. Because of the Israeli operation, the US did not encounter any Iranian Air Force opposition. Because of the Israeli operation, there was no ground-to-air threat posed to the US. It was a very smooth operation, certainly, and first and foremost, because of American capabilities, American hardware, but assisted to a great extent by its number one partner, which is the Jewish state. I would like to say a few words about the notion that the war was ended. The war is over, and both Israel and Iran have agreed to a ceasefire. I would urge people to take it easy and not to allow the genuine eagerness for an end to war to cloud the reality, sacrificing Middle East reality on the altar of alternate reality has yielded the Oslo Accord, in fact, has yielded the rise of the Ayatollah to the helm in Iran, has yielded many counterproductive developments, most of that due to the West and sometimes Israel allowing them to be swept by unfounded eagerness, sacrificing reality and celebrating an alternate reality, which is always more convenient, more comfortable than the real reality. And I would like just to mention a few elements, few features before we rush into the assumption that the war is over. We're talking about the Middle East, and this is the Middle East where for the last 1400 years there hasn't been yet intra-Muslim or intra-Arab peaceful coexistence, and here we already celebrate supposed end to war, opening a new chapter. By the way, I hope, I pray that those such yearning indeed is going to be realized, but we should be very careful before we rush into it through actual steps on the ground. Most importantly, when we talk about the Middle East, we should also realize we talk about a Middle East where regimes do not rise to power through ballot. They rise to power through bullet, namely one form of violence or another form of violence. And that means that they are tenuous by definition. Then until another group assembles more power, more violence to topple them, to unseat them. Regimes which are tenuous produce or yield policies which are tenuous and also produce accords which are tenuous. And once again, it does not sound as a very optimistic assumption, but sadly, this is the reality. We are talking about the Middle East, which, contrary to the West, does not cherish or is not driven by money talks, especially not the terrorist regimes of the Ayatollah in Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, the PLO. All of them regard ideology, fanatic ideology, much, much, much more importantly than any financial or diplomatic bonanza. We should be aware of it, especially when it comes to Iran. The talks about the mullahs, Ayatollah, finally will understand that they cannot achieve their goal, that they're better off benefiting from American generosity. Unfortunately, that assumption clashes with Middle East reality of the last 47 years, since February 79, when the Ayatollah assumed control of Iran. The US has negotiated, showering the Ayatollahs with hundreds of billions of dollars, and it has not delivered the yearned results. It has not moderated the Ayatollahs, has not induced them to accept peaceful coexistence, has not transformed them into good faith negotiator, and certainly has not distanced them from their ideology. While the West is driven by money talks, when it comes to the Ayatollah, it's the ideology that walks. And ideology is fundamentally very fanatic, has its roots in 680 AD. Now, in the West, who cares about 680 AD? Who cares about ancient history? The West is usually focused on the present and speculation about the future. Well, most of the Middle East is driven by history, certainly the Ayatollahs. For them, 680, by the way, that's the battle which started the ongoing rift between the Sunnis and the Shiites, 1400-year-old clashes between them. Then the supposed disappearance of the 12 Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi, in the 10th century, and the supposed expected reappearance shortly. But according to the Shiite of Iran, the Twelvers, as they're called, that reappearance must be ushered in through violence against the apostate Sunnis, and violence against the infidel West, especially the great American Satan. And the Shiites must demonstrate willingness to sacrifice their life. Namely, this is an apocalyptic vision, which again has guided the Ayatollahs since day one. I mentioned that because the assumption that certain bombing or certain gestures are going to move the Ayatollahs from their vision has been frustrated by reality. I don't see any sign that they contemplate abandoning their ideology, and therefore we should be careful before we are saying we say they are ending their war. We destroyed their capabilities beyond repair. Anyone who assumes that forgets, well, there are Chinese in the arena. And I would be dumbfounded if China is not already working with the Ayatollahs to restore their capabilities. I would be shocked if North Korea doesn't do that. Russia, maybe yes, maybe no, but we we must remember that it doesn't matter how tough were the beatings suffered by the Ayatollahs, restoring could take shorter time and could last much faster than we assume. Just a reminder, Israel demolished, completely obliterated the Egyptian military might in 67, but by 68, 69, Egypt engaged Israel in a war of attrition, which cost Israel heavily, and few years later, 73, almost overwhelmed Israel. And we should give the Ayatollah some credit, and certainly the Chinese and the North Korea and maybe the Russian, to assume that it ain't over until it's over. We're talking about President Trump. Maybe a few words, my own assumption, and I don't claim to have any inside connection around Trump, but there's no doubt the president moved closer to the Israeli position on Iran since he came back from the Gulf. Some so-called specialists already lamented U.S.-Israel relations when they saw the president in the Gulf, but bypassing Israel, supposedly turn his back on Israel, which was absolutely detached from reality. The president came to the Gulf with a commercial agenda. Israel is not part of that agenda, but in the Gulf, he met with General Kurilla, the commander of CENTCOM. And as far as I know, General Kurilla shared with the president his own assessment, which have been taken, and rightly by the president, as non-political, non-ideological assessment, which were more or less consistent with what he heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu, from Minister Ron Derman, who is basically Netanyahu's right-hand man. And moreover, he had eyeball-to-eyeball discussions with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I have no doubt that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia thanked the president for the trillions of dollars which are going to improve the trade balance between Saudi Arabia and the U.S., Saudi investments in the U.S., U.S. sale of military product to Saudi Arabia, but the Crown Prince added to Trump, with no advisors around them, Mr. President, I appreciate this trillions of dollars, but I want you to know, much more important is the Iranian machete at my throat. And as long as you negotiate with the Ayatollahs, that machete will remain at my throat. The only way that you can remove that throat is by removing the Ayatollah regime. Now, I'm aware, and I heard it on the Hill, that there's no appetite in the US for regime change. I'm aware that the US is still haunted by the attempts of regime change in Afghanistan and Iraq. But anyone who lumps together Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran demonstrate, in my mind, detachment from Middle East reality. Iran is not Afghanistan or Iraq historically, culturally, ethnically, religiously, socially, educationally, and as far as tendency towards democracy. I don't think anyone talks about the US ground forces bringing democracy to Iran. I don't think anyone talks about nation building in Iran. But certainly, if we learn anything from the 2009 and 2020 attempts by the Iranians to topple the Ayatollahs, where they were eagerly waiting for the US to extend a hand, but they were left by President Obama and Biden hanging high and dry. Anyone who understands what took place then should know the Iranian people cannot topple the Ayatollah regime on their own. They're eager for outside assistance, not outside ground forces, but outside involvement, which is going to destroy the Ayatollah's infrastructure, which is going to eliminate the Ayatollah's leadership, the military leadership, and the political leadership, and anyone who is deterred from taking on the so-called political leadership should realize we're not talking about political leadership in the Western sense. Iran's military, Iran's intelligence, Iran's terror operations are directed, are controlled first and foremost by Iran's top clerics. If you want to neutralize Iran's military, you must eliminate Iran's top cleric, which is going to be applauded by most Iranians. We are being told that American involvement, Israeli involvement in regime change could escalate violence. And I'm dumbfounded by such a contention. What is going on right now? What did go on until the Israeli operation? But for Ayatollah's terrorism, Ayatollah's drug trafficking, Ayatollah's fueling civil war subversion in the Gulf, throughout the Middle East, in Africa, and throughout Latin America. If you want to de-escalate violence, you have to take care of the chief epicenter of violence, which happens to be the Ayatollah regime. And to sum up what I've tried to share with you now in the last few minutes, I would only say that in order to eliminate war and terrorism, in order to be consistent with the president's view or vision of putting an end to wars and terrorism, preventing wars and terrorism, minimizing wars and terrorism, which is a noble vision. But you cannot do it without eliminating the chief epicenter. Namely, it is incumbent upon those who want to put an end to war to eliminate the Ayatollah's regime. Otherwise, it requires a belief that leopards do not change only tactics, but if we try hard enough, leopards also are going to change spots. Leopards changing spots defies nature, defies reality, and I don't believe that sound national security could be based on wishful thinking.
Yoram, thank you so much for that overview, the recap of really the perspective of the regime in Iran, and that they're not just going away and changing overnight. So let me ask you, in terms of the US or the world's understanding of this conflict and the ethos of the regime in Iran, has anything changed now that the US has partnered with Israel in such a very blatant military operation? Do you think moving forward, the US will be more willing to engage in such activities in the future, or is the US going to return to that world of negotiation and sanctions? And likewise, the world over. Is the world applauding Israel and then moving on with life and returning to trying to make deals with Iran, or is there a shift? So again, assuming, as you're suggesting, the Iranians aren't changing, is the world going to change?
Well, I don't have much hope for Europe, the rest of the world. I certainly have much hope. I'm very confident in the U.S. sense of realism, without ignoring the hurdles on the way and reality. To the best of my knowledge, the president is still going through an inside himself debate. The president's knee-jerk reaction, which characterized him during his first term, has been to view the world through transactional lenses. Sadly, that's not the real world, certainly not the real Middle East, as I said. In the Middle East, certainly among fanatic entities, it's not money that talks, it's ideology that walks. And the president still has that transactional element in his in his mind, although he certainly has removed himself from that to a certain degree. Although the isolationists have lost some clout, and we have seen that, we saw that through the US bombing the nuclear installations in Iran, but we must not underestimate their impact on the president. The isolationists include some of his relatives, some of his very, very close friends, some of his top financial supporters. And it's not easy for the president to defy them completely. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, the president is confronted by reality, as presented to him also by the American Armed Services, CENTCOM in particular, and that has caused some change to the better, and no one should underestimate the impact by Prime Minister Netanyahu, by Minister Ron Dermer, who both of them have been in touch with the president, in touch with close advisors of the president, and certainly they have had their own impact.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Thank you for all the important work you are doing right now in DC, in the US, to really fight for Israel. Thank you to all our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.